Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So, the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. Before we begin today's story, I have a question for you. I'm considering changing the format of the show in the new year to a single longer episode every week, with occasional bonus episodes, rather than two shorter ones with no bonuses. Let me know what you think of that by messaging me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or leave a comment on the website sfipodcast.com. Now, on to the show. In this episode, we are continuing the story of Angulimala. Angulimala was really a Himsaka, kinda like how Darth Vader was really Anakin Skywalker in the Star Wars movies. In the previous episode, we met Ahimsaka's dad, who was a royal priest and an astrologer. Ahimsaka's birth coincided with a strange case of Saint Elmo's fire around some weapons of the king's soldiers. The priest and astrologer predicted that meant his baby boy would become the most terrible villain the country had ever seen. The priest wanted to put his baby boy in prison to prevent the crime, in an idea that was later repeated in the Minority Report movie. The king, however, stopped his priest when he learnt that the boy was predicted to commit his crime single handedly and that he would not be leading others into a life of crime as well. So the priest and his wife brought up Ahimsaka with some gentle nudges. The boy grew up not knowing anything about swords, spears, and lightsabers. He was at the absolute top of his class, all through school. And then he aced his SATs. Naturally, he asked his parents to send him to the best university, Takshashila, sort of like the Harvard of ancient India, and perhaps the whole ancient world. We'll continue the story here. Ahimsaka was excited to go to Takshashila. Given the lack of consistent and quick communication channels between distant towns, the college application procedure was very different from what we have today. So, applying was usually in person. The good news was that decisions were quick. So, if the professor liked you, you began classes right away. So it was with Ahimsaka. His prospective professor, Master Yodha, looked him over. "How feel you?" he asked the boy. "Cold, sir," said Ahimsaka. "Afraid, are you?" asked Yodha. "What has that got to do with anything, sir?" "Everything. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And I sense much fear in you." "But master," said Ahimsaka, "I promise to be a good student." "Well," said the master, "this is going to lead to a lot of problems for the whole world. But, on the other hand, it would be silly of me to turn away tuition money when it comes knocking on my door. So I will take you on as my Padawan learner. Ahimsaka did keep his promise of being a good student. A little too well. He was frequently correcting his professors in class and even during assignments and exams. He refused to pass notes. He turned in homework assignments way ahead of time and he asked for extra work. Generally, he was setting a ridiculously high bar for all the other students and some professors too. Naturally, the student council wanted to do something about it. They held a special meeting excluding Ahinsaka. They had just one burning topic to discuss. Everyone struggled to keep up with the enthusiastic Ahinsaka. As it is, they had enough of a challenge simply handing in their assignments right before the deadline. Then, when on Friday night, right before the big sports weekend, Ahinsaka insisted on extra assignments, it was the last straw. It was just the presence of their professor that stopped all the other students from beating Ahinsaka up. But enough was enough. So the student council was brainstorming how to solve this problem. Let's send him a fake telegram from home asking him to go visit, said one student. Too expensive, said another. And all the nearby post offices would find it weird if we sent a telegram claiming to originate somewhere else. Let's instead let loose all the animals when it's his turn to feed them next. It'll create chaos and everyone will blame him for it. No, they might not, said a third. What if we make it seem like he's been slipping out of dorms, breaking curfew? Too mild, a fourth student spoke up. Everyone slips out of their dorms and breaks curfew. Our professors know it, and no one complains. I think we have to make the professors hate him in some way. Like, what if he criticizes one of Yodha's papers? It's sure to work, because Ahinsaka is sure to find some flaw in it. That was the student council president who suggested that. And that idea appealed to everyone, so they all acted on it. As if by accident, one of them slipped Ahinsaka a paper that had been published by Yodha. But the publication details had been obscured. So Ahinsaka did not realize that it was Yodha who had authored that paper. So when he quoted the paper in class the next day as an example of a complete failure to grasp the subject, Yodha turned beet red, while the rest of the class roared in laughter. And what's worse, Ahimsaka stood by his earlier assessment even after he realized Yodha had authored it. That did not sit well with Yodha, and the teacher's pet had had a fall from grace. That wasn't bad for Ahimsaka though. Even if Yodha asked him deliberately difficult questions, Ahimsaka was able to answer them all correctly. But it was certainly bad for his professor. Yodha's failure to teach the scamp a lesson frustrated him even further. But there was one way that Yodha could have his revenge. And that was at the time of Guru Dakshina. If you haven't heard the term before, Guru Dakshina is a payment to the teacher by the student. Unlike modern educational institutions, the universities of the past were a lot more trusting. Students would pay for their education after they had completed their course requirements. Pay your teacher whatever she or he asked for, and then you'd get your diploma. The other quirky thing about this ancient Indian tuition fee was that the guru or teacher had absolute authority to decide what the student had to pay. Most would ask for money, flowers, a bottle of wine, but some didn't. They chose to abuse the system. Ekalavya's case is a very famous one. It's from the Mahabharata, and we'll cover it in a future episode when we get to that part of the epic. Regardless, Yodha took this rather ignoble route of making Ahimsaka pay, both literally for his tuition and figuratively for his insolence. It would be impossible for Ahimsaka to weasel out of this, because the teacher's word was law. As each student walked up to Yodha, paid him his Guru Dakshina, and moved on, Yodha could barely contain his excitement. Finally, Ahimsaka stepped up. Clearly, they were not doing this alphabetically, or Ahimsaka would have been one of the early ones. Ahimsaka took out his money bag, ready to pay, but Yodha stopped him. "I want 1,000 fingers," he said. "Of what, Master Yodha?" asked the boy calmly. "Whiskey, vodka?" "Human fingers. But I caution you, they must all be 4 fingers of the right hand." Ahimsaka took on this piece of news surprisingly well. He turned around and did a quick mental calculation. Nope, there weren't enough students and teachers at university. Without another word, Ahimsaka stepped out of school and was gone. After a few days, there was another student council meeting. One of the students said to the president, "I have to admit that without your idea, it might not have been much of a victory." The president was surprised. "Victory? Victory, you say?" "Not victory. The shroud of the dark side has fallen. Begun, the destruction has." We'll pause the story there. In the next episode, we'll continue the story where we'll see Ahimsaka's transformation to the dark side. And plenty more Star Wars references. And in case you're wondering, the name Yoda from Star Wars is certainly based on the Sanskrit word Yodha, meaning warrior. George Lucas may have been inspired by Buddhism and by Angulimala's story in his depiction of the Jedi Order and Darth Vader's story in Star Wars. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. Thanks to all of you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. I'll see you next time.